Hey friends, welcome to this week's video. This week we are revisiting the KPH30i's and doing a slight mod to them. Well, more like an earpad swap, but if you haven't seen the first review that I did with these when I was in Seattle, check the video above. I did a full breakdown of what I liked about them. Too long didn't read. I love these. These are probably my favorite of all of the Koss trifecta that we've reviewed. They are very neutral. They are very nice to listen to, but the biggest complaint most people have are the earpads. So these earpads are very scratchy. They don't have very nice comfort in the long term. However, they do a really good job about keeping everything neutral and not affecting the sound signature too much. So it's almost perfect. They're so lightweight and all that sort of stuff, but you find that a lot of people do switch out the pads and try to do modifications to either get better comfort or get a little bit of some sound extension in a certain area so that they can, you know, get a little bit more spacious sound, maybe something with more bass. So that's where you usually see these earpad mods come from, is just people trying to get a little bit more out of a great set of cheap headphones. So the ones that we will be looking over today are the Yaxi pads, which can also be used for the Porter Pros, and we'll also be using a Grado replacement earpads for a little bit more over-the-ear look. They both have different vibes, they have different looks, and they also affect the sound signature tremendously different, but that's the reason why I wanted to go over a couple different options so you guys can see what you want to do. Let's start off with the Yaxi pads. I'll cut away to a little bit of surgery that I did to make sure that they get in the place that they need to, but we will come back and talk about how they sound in comparison to other things. Pardon me for the video quality here. OBS did something weird on the recording. However, the big thing that you need to notice here is that it's always good to have a knife for this, just to get in between the slots and make sure you can pop them out. When you do pop them out, be very careful, because it is a fragile wire that's just soldered to the driver, but you should be able to take the entire piece out. So you don't have to keep it locked into the headband. You should be able to take the entire ear cup or earpiece out from the headband so that you can actually have a little bit more space to work with when you are adding the Yaxi pads. The reason why this is very important is because you don't want to try to keep everything together and worry about having to maneuver around the wire and accidentally pull it out. It's just better to displace the section that's holding the wire to the headband and then be able to add the Yaxi pad, you know, with all the flexibility you need. Just keep track of your left and rights, and then make sure that when you replace the actual pad itself, that you replace the housing for where the cable base is mounted. Once that's there, then you can just replace things with the clips and you should be all good. I've sped up a lot of these things, or at least cut away to a lot of pieces, just to tell you the big pieces of how to get this constructed properly, because it took me a little bit of time. I was going to do it live, but I was finagling around a lot. But these are kind of just ways to do this to make sure that you're safe and you're not destroying your headphones. Alright, for the Yaxi pads, you will notice that there is a nice concave to them, and that's just a result of the installation and the fact that the Yaxi pads were round, and the D shape of the KPH30i's just added that concave. I'm not going to lie, it's really nice actually, because it's really comfortable on head. So as we put this on head, there's just a lot more cushion. There is definitely more space between the driver and your ear. You don't really feel the driver like you would with the standard KPH30i's, and the cushion is a little bit more plush. In terms of overall looks, it doesn't really look all that different from when I wear the KPH30i's with the stock paddings, which is nice because you don't really add any bulk. There's nothing really crazy that you changed. It's just comfort for yourself. The other good thing is that because of the plushness, there's just not that scratchiness. So with these guys, I know you talked about the scratchiness of these versus these guys, which are a little bit quieter. So they're just a lot more smooth. They're nice feeling on the ears. So longevity in terms of listening is going to be great for that. So in terms of sound, we did do, or at least I did, a session with 4 songs. I did Tritonal Superhero, Gold by Chet Faker, Tom Mish's Goes Through Me, and Serendipity by the lovely Sophie Marks. So a lot of different vibes, a lot of different vocalists within those tracks, just to sort of get enough diversity so that I can get a good sense of how the signature has changed. So as we go through these, the big thing that I've noticed with the Yaxi pads is it does give you better bass extension. So for Tritonal's track, you just heard the bass be a lot more present, and even with some of the instruments, you heard a bit of a sustain that lasted longer and a little bit more haunty and a little bit more full there, which I appreciated. This was also with Chet Faker's. It was just a more full sounding song. It didn't sound so analytical. It's just a very full and bassy song. But we'll get back to some things that I noticed with some of the vocals. With Goes Through Me, it was a lot better from the introduction of instruments because there is a strong bass line there, and they bring it out, they bring it back in. It was just a more dramatic introduction to that bass line, which I appreciated a lot more out of these guys. And then there's also like a smooth rendering. Like it kind of mellows everything out. It's not so harsh in areas. It's just very, very mellow, very mild, very smooth. Like regardless of what you listen to, it has that smoothness to it, which will work across a lot of genres. I think that's the reason why the Yaxi pads are really nice to put on. Where the stock pads excel at is where basically with vocals. So with the Chet Faker song, you heard that his voice came in a lot more clear. It's a lot more prominent. For the Tritonal song, it's a lot more neutral. So if you want it to be a little bit less warm and you want it to be able to hear all the instruments and make sure that nothing gets overpowered, then this might be better. But for the Tritonal song, I did prefer the Yaxi pads. In terms of Goes Through Me, it's the same thing. It's very neutral. All the instruments kind of were at the same level. They came in, they worked well in sync, but the introductions to instruments weren't as fun, or they weren't as anticipated. So that was just something that I saw was missing. But it did have a little bit better isolation in vocals. So at the end of that song by Tom Misch, it goes into like a poetry rap where the rapper kind of just goes through a dialogue, and the intonations that he uses and the tones that he uses and the enunciations and the stress on certain syllables is just a lot more clear with the stock pads, and that's where I kind of appreciated it. That's when like the music and the instrumentals got tapered down and was really focused on his voice. That's where I saw these shine over the originals. The originals, again, were just very smooth, very mellow, but in terms of like distinctive characteristics, this was a little bit better for the vocals, and that kind of played over as well to the Sophie Marsh track and with Serendipity, because her voice still sounded mellow and chill with the Blue Wednesday background, and with the Yaxi pads, because of that bass line, that bass is extended a little bit, giving it a little bit more presence, so her voice takes a little bit of a recession there, but these ones made her sparkle a lot better. So if you're looking for female vocalists or someone with a little bit more airy tones and you want those vocalists to shine a little bit more, the stock paddings might be better for you because they don't have any bass addition that may detract from that person's voice. For someone like a Hayley Williams, it probably won't matter, or like a Amy Winehouse, it probably won't matter because they're just such powerful voices. But people with more airy, angelic voices kind of, they just don't have that same sparkle that I would be looking for with the Yaxi pad. So again, the stocks work there. So that's my overall perception of those. Let's move on to the Grado pads and then see how those function. This will be a lot easier to install, so let's cut out to that. Once you remove the stock padding, the Grados are going to be a lot easier to set up. Once you have that bare driver there, there's this nice slot for the ear cup for the KPH30Is to sit in with the replacement pads. The biggest thing that you'll have to compensate for is that the cable will need a little slot to live within. So if you cut just vertically down on the bottom half of the replacement pad, you can make a little bit of a house for that cable to live within, and it'll keep it all locked in without having additional stress on the cable. So a lot easier setup here. Let's go back to the A roll and see how this looks on head and how it sounds. So on head, these don't look that bad, surprisingly. They have a little bit of Princess Leia in them, but this is a more recognizable silhouette for a headphone. When I was wearing these alone without, with just the stock pads in there around Seattle, I was getting some looks because it just looked a little bit foreign to people and they didn't know what it was. However, with these pads, they bring them more to less alien territory where people know what a headphone looks like, what they expect, etc. Outside of the looks being improved here, you will also get better comfort. So the comfort is amazing. I don't have any issues with things clamping on my head. It's very, very soft. There's space between the drivers. And yeah, it's overall just a very natural feeling headphone that's very light because of the cushions. It is a little scratchy for the foam, but because they're so thick, it doesn't really matter, and they don't really bother me all that much like the stock ones would, because it's just the driver pushing against me. There's some space there, so it actually does not, I don't mind the texture of the pads. In addition to that, it's just, I feel like because it relieves the clamp and takes it off of your head a little bit, it's just going to be a lot easier to wear for longer periods of time. So yeah, comfort, again, comfort is king. If you can wear these things longer and listen to your music for longer, it's a win. So just from aesthetics and comfort perspective, big improvement. But I'm sure you guys care more about the sound here. So again, I ran it through 4 different tracks this time to really compare these with the stock tuning of the KPH30i's. So the 4 songs I picked with this one are Streetlights by Daniel Caesar, more slow song. Out of My Mind, Monsoon, that's more like a jazzy song. Nice vocalist though. Crossing Fields by Lisa, Japanese song. That's more of a J-rock, more attacking song. And then we have something a little bit more smooth with J Balvin and Anita with Downtown. It's a Spanish song, a lot of nice beats. They kind of flip-flop on the vocals, but there's 2 different vocalists in there to give me a little bit of spice and flavor to analyze those. So from what I've seen so far is you get a lot more clarity. It's just very, very obvious. Like, for almost all these songs, the vocals were better and a little bit more full. They didn't sound like they were too harsh. They didn't sound like they were losing anything, and they were able to keep up. So like the thing that I will say here is that you still get bass extension. You get a little bit better vibe with the music. Everything sounds a little bit more full, but unlike the Yaxi pads, you don't get that recession in the quality or sparkle of people's voices, and you don't have to care about if they sing hard or sing soft or whatever. Their voices come through very, very clear with that same sparkle without having to sacrifice anything to get better bass. So it's just a more full sound overall, and you like it for a lot of different songs. Let's see what else. From Street Lights, again, it was mostly better impact as they started crescendoing on that song. So as they start bringing in the drums, you really feel that. For Out of My Mind, it was just very amazing how the vocals came in very, very clear. There's like no mud. It was just very spacious and eerie too. I think the space between the drivers brings a soundstage to this that wasn't really there before. So it allows things to have a persistence on there and just feel like it's coming from further away, which makes the sound better. It's not like so stuck onto you. But like there are certain times when he was singing and he would do a run or something like that, and I would get chills because it was just so eerie and sticky in there. As we move on to Crossing Fields from Lisa, it was more clear. There's better separation in the instruments, and there was staying power, as I mentioned. So like when a drum or a guitar was like finished with its riff, that note would just stick around a little bit longer, and it was nice to hear that. I will say that there's a little bit less power on this one. So there is a portion where there's like a rising guitar right before the chorus, and there was just a little bit less of attack that I was expecting. So on the KPH30i's, that attack of that guitar just sounded a lot more prevalent and forthcoming, and it was just there. It's like I felt like that was what it was supposed to sound like. This is a little bit recessed here, but otherwise, like it may have lost power, but there was a lot more control with the vocals and portions where it got harsh. There are times when she's singing her brains out where her voice got a little bit harsh on the KPH30i's, and that's where I was like, oh crap, that sucks. But like I get it because it still sounded good for the guitar portions where they wanted to go harder. It felt like I felt that. But for her voice, there are certain times where these harshened out her voice, while the ones with the Grado pads just performed a lot better. Again, a lot smoother rendition, not exactly perfect with guitar rendering, but overall very nice. And then as we move on to the J Balvin and Anita track of Downtown, I just felt like there's more room for them to breathe, especially when they were switching between their parts. It just felt like there was more space for them to flex what they were talking about. It is bassier without losing the voice. So again, much better when they started bringing in the chorus and the vibe in there. It was just a lot more smooth, a lot more full. It made me want to dance, and you know, I just like that. And I think the like as we've been talking about here, like Anita's voice had a lot more depth. It was just very airy on the KPH30i's, and it kind of washed like the reggaeton beats and all that sort of washed it off. But these brought in the beats, but they also brought some depth to her voice, so she could actually bat with that new bass that's introduced. So I did like the balance there. The thing that I will say that like over all tracks, what I saw is that because of the spacing, you may need more volume. So like I did find myself amping the volume a little bit because I wasn't hearing certain instruments as strong as I'd like to. But if I, you know, cranked it like 10%, 5%, I was able to get that clarity and get that piece out there. So there might be some driving considerations when adding this configuration, just because you might need to compensate for that new space that's been added there. But that's my overall thoughts on those two modifications. What I will do now is I will go into sound samples. We'll start off with a couple songs, and then we'll also go over a podcast as well as some gaming footage so that you guys can see how these perform. And then we'll wrap this up and my final conclusions on this.
Is just maybe not the same as he was in 2017 when he was on top of the world, and that Tyson has, you know, again, evolved his style to really be two or three different fighters at a time. You know, we talked about Floyd Mayweather adopting two or three different styles during his career and sometimes using them all at once. Yeah. The only way you see, in my opinion, Anthony Joshua beating Tyson is if he does knock him dead. And Tyson is hittable in certain instances, but he's slick defensively. He can go to that. The Otto Wallin fight showed it. I mean, many fights before that showed it. Klitschko showed it. But
you know
then
what, bro?
He's got this Kronk style where he just walks you down, puts that jab in your fucking face and says, eat it, you know? So
I actually think, you know, don't get me wrong, I wouldn't be betting on AJ to win this fight at all. But I think AJ, with his new... This all depends on the mentality of AJ. But regardless, AJ's skill set is more suited to a fight with Fury than it is with Usyk. I think because Usyk never stands still, even if we look in that mega round he had, where when we looked at it in slow-mo, it realised that 5 out of every 6 punches AJ threw, he was missing. Fury does stand still, and that's how Wilder was able to drop him multiple times in the fight. And I think that there's a chance that
Lord Sakai.
So recommendation time. In terms of all of these, they all have their own sort of redeeming quality, right? Even the stock pads, really good with sparkle for action and video game sequences, like the chings and the reload sounds and the, you know, blades hitting each other are very, very crisp on here. So high-end things will sound very, very sparkly and good on this. However, you will notice with your music, you know, missing a little bit of bass, a little bit of vibe. But for analytical listening, very good. If you want to just hear how something sounds neutrally, without any sort of emphasis, really good option, $20. However, I will say that pursuing some of these other options, like the Yaxi pads or the greater replacement pads, are redeemable. And again, like, you'll get a lot more warmth out of this, a little bit more bass. You will like sacrifice a little bit in the vocals and maybe some video game noises in terms of that, but you will get longer term comfort with a more full sound that most people will like. And then for the greater pads, these are my favorites, obviously, for almost everything. So like, while these ones, recessed voices and maybe podcasts don't sound that good, these ones will sound good. They bring the depth in people's voices. If they have a special mic that brings down their voice, you will hear it in this. It will bring in the bass and the vibe of the song without taking away the voice, which is the great thing about this. Is it adds comfort, still gives you great resolution in terms of what's being offered from this headphone, and it's very little to complain about, to be honest. Like, the only thing that I would say you should be careful around is driving. Like, it might not be as voluminous as you need it to be, so just pump the volume up a bit. But like, your video games are going to sound really good. It's going to have that depth of the music in the background while still being able to hear the bullets and the blades hit each other with nice precision in terms of just how it sings and all that sort of stuff. It's great. And then obviously for vocalists, it will maintain its power even though it does give you that bass extension. So overall, this is like the easiest modification to get you the most out of your bucks. But again, if you want something a little bit sleeker, the Yaxi pads are not a bad option. In fact, I'm probably going to switch out these stock ones for the Yaxi pads just for comfort. If I need that more detail and sparkle, I'll just go for the over-ear option here. But you know, since I have these two headphones anyway, I will probably be putting the Yaxi pads for like a sleeker, stealthier look when I'm out and about. But hopefully you guys liked that video. Appreciate you guys experimenting with me and allowing me to experiment with my channel, so I'm not just stuck in one niche. I can play around and, you know, look at fashion or look at technology or look at games or whatever, so that I can, you know, whatever you guys are looking at to purchase or are interested in, I can kind of explore it and see what I feel about it. So this was a good exercise because I literally did not know that earpads could make that much of a difference, but they make a significant difference. So it's definitely a good thing for you guys to check out as well. But anyway, if you could, please comment, subscribe, like, do all things that you do on a video that you like and love. And to all my OGs, thank you for sticking around. We're at 1580 around in terms of subscribers, and that's mostly because of you guys and your suggestions, your engagement, your comments, and everything that you do to help this channel out. I really, really appreciate it. I hope to see you guys on a live stream so I can talk to you more personally, but if not, just leave a comment about something that you'd like to see or that you liked about the video, and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. But yeah, hope you guys liked the video, but as always, appreciate you. Peace.